if there's anything I've realized, I'm not very good at working a conventional job. And the more I think about it, if I look at my world out here, I'm close enough to retirement now. There's not really much sense in me trying too hard to get a real job now because I live so far away from most of them. TxDOT would be a really good exception to that. I could end up getting to drive a backhoe or something, which was, as a kid, I had a Tonka backhoe. That was my dream, was to grow up and drive a backhoe. That was, I had like 3 or 4 things that I always enjoyed. If the neighbor came over with a backhoe to dig us a hole for some reason, I was just mesmerized. I mean, that was like a robot. That was so cool. We had a tractor with a front end loader, but we didn't have a backhoe. That backhoe was the coolest thing ever. The other cool thing that heavily warped my brain, I'm sure, was anytime I saw my dad welding something, just the idea of him taking a pile of scrap metal and building something that worked, that we needed. He was always tinkering with building something for the farm. And just growing up watching my dad building something by welding. Yeah, finally I got to a point, out here that I can do my own welding, I just never had a place that I could do it. They generally frown on welding in apartments. I don't really, get that, but, I guess they have their reasons. But it was the first time in my life that I've lived in a place that I could weld. I can make noise. I can run the generator out here. I can just, there's days I grab a sledgehammer and just beat the crap out of a piece of metal for fun. I mean, it eventually becomes something, but I just look at it and I'm like, yeah, I can make noise. This is great, It's awesome, so if I can, once I figured out, it's like, I just started piecing these things together in the last couple of weeks, honestly. I could build my version of a hot rod, only it would be an electric. I've already got the school bus. Why not put it back on the road and use it once in a while? If I needed to haul water, I could put a 1,000-gallon tank on that. I could haul water one day, and that would last me the rest of the year. So I wouldn't have to be going, at 4 miles to the gallon. That would suck. But I do it one time, and then I'm done. If I had access to this, if I saw a wrecked car, I could go buy it. And I'd have all the parts I'd need to build whatever I was going to build. That's just fun. And I just finally clicked it into my head as, when I'm out there cutting and welding and grinding, that's the best day ever. On a sunny day like today, I want to get out there and do some welding. We're gonna get this motorcycle finished, and then I'm looking for the next project. That might be it, or at least it's on the list now. Yeah. How much of this is going to happen this year? Guess we'll find out. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Oh yeah, like and subscribe. Comments. Do me the comments. They're down in the thing down there. All right. Bye. All right. Let's get this going, man. It's happening now. Yeah. Predictions and Goals 2025 edition. I don't know if I'm going to just shoot this from the hip and let it go, or I'm going to edit it, or this is my brainstorming session that nobody will see. Any of these are possible. Also, if you hear a funny clickety 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 sound, that's my amazing diesel heater. I'm a fan. I think I had it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks before I even took it out of the box. It got really cold, and I panicked and I ordered the thing. And then it got really warm again. And then it got kind of cold. I'm like, yeah, I should see if this thing works just in case it actually does decide to be winter. And this morning it was kind of cold again, so I've been using it for I would run it for an hour in the morning if it was cold, and then I've got my digital alarm clock has a built-in humidity sensor and temperature sensor, which is kind of a good combination. I don't think it's particularly accurate, but whatever. For me, my personal threshold is if I get it above about 50 degrees, I'll shut the heater off, and it's actually showing 52 now. But it feels nice, so I think I'll let it go for a while. It's not very warm in here yet. Okay. That says it's 50. Okay, close enough. So it's getting there. I've got a fleece that I haven't put on. In fact, I pushed the sleeves up on my sweatshirt already because the heater is literally right under the desk. It blows right on my legs. That is like the perfect thing, because normal mornings I'll sit here and drink my coffee and hot chocolate and eat my oatmeal and dork around on the computer for an hour or two, trying to ease into the day. So rather than heating the whole room, I just heat me. And then sunrise is going to be in about half an hour, 40 minutes now, I guess. And then it'll warm up. Anyway, it's going to be, yeah, it should get up to 66 today with almost no wind. We'll see how that turns out. Sometimes that works. It'll be good. Anyway, I wrote some notes yesterday, and then end of the day, I'm like, yeah, I need just a little bit more energy to do something like this, and I didn't have it. Also, I don't know if this is a thing or not. I've been putting a spoonful of peanut butter in my oatmeal, and then you dump the hot water in there, and it melts the peanut butter off the spoon, and then you mix it all up, and then you got, peanut butter flavored oatmeal. Well, I kind of just absent-mindedly used the same spoon to stir my hot chocolate. It's like I was heating up water on the stove anyway, so I thought, well, okay, I'll have a hot chocolate and a coffee and the oatmeal, and I'll get them all heated up at the same time. Okay. So now my hot chocolate has a peanut butter flavor to it, which is basically Reese's. So that should be good, right? Yeah. I don't feel bad about it. I don't know if anybody else is doing that yet. I could be a trendsetter, or maybe it's just a bad idea. I don't know. This is kind of what I'm looking at right now. I had all these ideas in 2024, most of them didn't happen, and then I thought, well, okay, what I need is a lot more money to do the things I really want to do. Also, if I'm rubbing my eye a lot, sorry, I got grinder grit a couple days ago, and it's getting better. I'll be wearing, these are safety glasses. They actually fit pretty good. I should just do my videos like this. I'll just, Stevie would probably kick my ass. Anyway, these are actually safety glasses if you see me wearing them, but once in a while the wind will catch something and bounce it off my face and it sneaks in, or I don't know where they come from, but yeah, so if you see me rubbing my eye, that's like I grindered my eye a little bit. It happens, occupational hazard or something. So ideas that I was looking at last, a month ago. I was having a cash crunch and I was really annoyed, and I'm like, okay, I was working 6 or 7 days a week at the motel. I was originally, when I accepted the job, I said, well, I'll give you 15 hours a week. I think I could deal with that. Okay. And I was supposed to do maintenance. And then both of the housekeepers quit in the same day, and Sharon, the manager, she's like, hey, do you want to work some more hours? And it started off as a joke, and I'm just thinking, well, I'll help out until we get somebody else. And since then, let's see, there's been that guy, other guy, another. One of the guys, he kept coming over and asking about a job. Okay. And then the day he was supposed to come over, my understanding, and I think Sharon's understanding, was, oh yeah, he's going to come over first thing in the morning and do paperwork and then start working, right? Well, he shows up at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon to do paperwork. And she was like, no, it was supposed to be in the morning so we could start working. Where were you? Oh, I was at my other job. They were busy. She's like, no, we're busy. Oh, okay. I'll come over tomorrow then. Okay. Doesn't show up. A couple days later. Sorry, I was in jail. We're like, I don't think this is going to work out, Apparently the town that I live near is full to the brim with retards and slackers. I don't know. I just feel like, I never really thought of myself as an overachiever, but I do tend to show up on time, ready to work, sober. Yeah. Anyway. So I might be at the motel the rest of my life because nobody else can seem to show up. I don't know. Yeah, it's just, anyway. It wasn't my master plan to go be a housekeeper, and as it turned out, I think in the first 3 or 4 months I had everything fixed that we really needed to worry about, and yeah, and it was just down to cleaning. So officially, let me speak in English today. Officially, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, was my last day at the motel. I turned in notice and was just going to quit. And then we thought about it for a while, and immediately the day after the 7th or 2 days after the 7th, she's like, hey, can you work this day? Because I need to do a thing. Okay, it just was an arbitrary day. I just thought Pearl Harbor Day was a good time to quit a job, So that was my official 2 weeks notice on the 7th was going to, be the end. And then a little bit later, well, how about if you can work 1 day a week? Okay. I'm like, yeah, I could probably squeeze that in, The reason for me quitting was I had a bunch of parts that I had been buying for projects that I really wanted to do. I hadn't done a video in forever. I'm like, I'd like to get back to what I used to be able to do, is, make pointless videos like this that a few people watch 5-10% of the video. Yeah, that's great. Anyway, so it ended up that, well, okay, I can do one day a week, and then I'm like, well, 1 day a week is actually about enough to buy food. Oh, yeah, 1 day a week sounds good, and the motel isn't busy every day usually, so the way it was, manager was going to clean as many rooms as she could practically do because she's up half the night checking people in, and so she'd clean some rooms in the morning and then she'd take a nap and then do it again. And usually, if you looked at the week average, she'd almost keep up, and if she had one busy day, then I'd get the text message usually, hey, can you come in tomorrow? So I'd get there and there was 3 or 4 rooms from the day before that she hadn't been able to clean, and so then I got a nice solid 6-hour shift. That's typically how long I'd work in a day, and that would get her caught up, and then, the next week something would happen, and, so it worked out okay. And then now it's maybe 3 days a week again. Okay. Now I can afford to buy more parts and stuff. So this will be okay. As long as it's not 7 or 8 days a week like it had been. There was before, I don't know if I mentioned, I was planning on going to Alaska. This last summer was when I was hoping to go. Got a bunch of stuff done for paperwork. And then something didn't work out on my end. It was just like, stupid thing. And it wasn't really practical for me to have to keep going to El Paso to do some of the things I needed to do because I was only on a bicycle. And it was just like, it's just not worth the trouble right now. Maybe I'll do it later. So that still might happen. But yeah, there was getting that day off to go to El Paso was a challenge because I was working every day, and during the winter I ended up just staying at the motel because we were busy enough that it kind of worked out that if I was at the motel, I could start work earlier and I could work until dark if we had to get the rooms done, because I'm not really very fast at housekeeping, but guess I do a good job. I don't know. And I'm the only guy that showed up, so yeah, I'm a shoo-in. Anyway, so yeah, last winter I just stayed at the motel because on the bike I didn't want to ride in the gravel in the dark, getting home or getting to work in the morning. Okay. Or getting to work. Yeah, getting to work in the morning and getting home after work. So I just stayed there, which, you know, was great. I had Wi-Fi, I had power, I had a hot shower, I had a bed. I didn't have any of this stuff, you know. But end of the day, I didn't get any of my stuff done. There was weeks I didn't get home. Sometimes I'd sneak home for, I'd zip home, grab some stuff I needed, and then zip back again. Or if I really needed something, she'd give me a ride, and I'd grab some stuff, like more clothes or something, and then go back. And, you know, I had 2 coffee makers and 2 rice cookers because I had nothing to eat there, you know, so I had a rice cooker there and I had a rice cooker here, and then one day I came home and carried 30 pounds of beans and rice back to work so that I wouldn't have to buy it again, you know. Yeah, it was, you know, one of those weird things, kind of a job of convenience, you know. It's like, it wasn't a good job, but it was not too far from here, and, you know. I just used up my propane tank. And I was looking at the label. I always take a piece of, you know, my official labeling, blue painter's tape and a Sharpie. I'd labeled it when I started using it, which, if I can see, December 21st, 2022, I opened that tank. It's one of the Blue Rhino 15-pound tanks. So I got just over 2 years out of 15 pounds of propane, right? That's pretty good, you know. I don't sit there and run the heater and fall asleep like, you know. Hey, David. A guy that used to live out here, he's still got property. He comes out once in a while to visit. And, he's like, hey, let's go to town and get some propane. Okay. You know, so I grabbed one of my empty tanks and we'd go to town. And a couple days later, he'd send me a message and, hey, I got to go to town to get some propane. I'm like, David, didn't we just get propane? He's like, yeah, I turned on the heat and I fell asleep watching a movie. Woke up the next morning and the tank was empty. He'd burned the whole tank in a day or something like that. I don't know if that's even possible, but he'd burned through the whole tank in a couple of days. Right? I'm like, that would last me the whole winter. I'm a miser. I hate burning money. I will waste money on important things, you know, parts for the robot or something like that, but I don't burn it for heat. I'll put on a jacket, you know. Except for this morning, I thought, you know what, I'm going to burn a little bit of heat. Honestly, though, I think it's warm enough. I'm going to turn it off. It's up to 54. That's plenty. My heater has a remote control, which is, I feel funny using it because the heater is literally, I mean, I'd have to crawl under the desk to turn it off, so just keep the remote control where hopefully I can find it. Now it'll be quiet. Yeah, this will be nice. We'll get a little blast of heat for a few seconds while it cools itself off. Yeah, okay, so we just made it through the preamble. Good job. All right, 2025 predictions and goals. At the moment, I've got the electric KLR project working, not nearly finished, but it works. I've got, hang on, I just want to check something while I'm thinking about it. I have a tracking number for the new and improved motor, and it looks like it spent a week in California. That's not good, but it was over the holidays. Let's see if it's moved since yesterday. That would be nice. Okay, there's the motor. Go on eBay. It hasn't moved since December 26th. So that's about a week now. It got to the first stop. It's at a FedEx location and it's just sitting there. Not good. It's probably holding somebody's door open or something like that. 44-pound box. I hope they figured out that, yeah, we need that thing over here pretty soon. Oh, 42 pounds. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so we don't have the motor yet. That's going to be cool. With the new sprocket, the KLR will go about 16, 17 miles an hour indicated. It'll go about 20 down the hill. That seems to be the motor. It doesn't freewheel, and so as it's going down the hill, it actually is slowing you down a little bit. It doesn't just keep going faster. The new motor, they say could go 60 miles an hour. I'm thinking if it goes 40 miles an hour, I'm going to be pretty happy with it. So we'll see if it ever gets here. Also, I mean, it's going to be a factor of if I was Chinese, it would go 60 miles an hour. All right. I think, the idea of Chinese specs are the fact that Chinese weigh about 130 pounds, not 200 and some pounds. All right. Also, they probably don't have a 40-mile-an-hour headwind like I do, so that could be a factor. And this is on a much bigger motorcycle. They're thinking it's going to go on something smaller. So, yeah, But if it can go 40 miles an hour, I'm going to be pretty excited. So, yeah, we'll see how it turns out. Also, anything I had for range numbers and batteries is going to go right out the window because that motor is, I think, 4 times as powerful. Like it's rated in watts or, yeah. So the motor I'm using now is 750 watts times 4 is 3,000. The new one is 3,000 watts. So it can use up power 4 times as fast, but then maybe go 3 or 4 times as fast. So if I can run it for an hour, I will go further in that same hour before the battery goes dead, maybe. Except aerodynamics, square of the speed or the cube of the speed? I can always forget that. Anyway, going faster, more wind resistance, uses more power. Alright, we checked, it's not here yet. Good, alright. Also, welcome to all the new subscribers. It's been a nice bump. Apparently people like the KLR electric idea. At least enough to click on it. So, if I make better videos, you guys can watch it for longer. That's a good goal. We should do that this year. I got bullet points, but not notes. So, sorry. You get to listen to pick out the parts you want. What I was looking at a couple of months ago, if I sold the ranch, I'd have money. I could go do other stuff that I had wanted to do. Like, for instance, I was looking at, I could buy something like a U-Haul truck, convert it to a camper, and go van lifing. Okay. If I sold the ranch for, the magical $50,000, the U-Haul truck I was looking at was about $10,000. That would leave me some money left over. I would probably do some work on the van, give it some solar, some batteries, put a few of the things that I wanted in there and throw the rest of the stuff away. Or donate it. I wouldn't just take it all to the landfill. Some of the stuff somebody might think was amusing or valuable or something like that. So most of the things I have, and this was the problem, aren't worth selling. Like, if I just look around here, there's things that I paid hundreds of dollars for, but they aren't worth that anymore because the market has moved on. If I could sell it on eBay, I don't know that it's worth paying the shipping. Like, if I sold this thing that I paid $100 for $20, it might be worth $20, but it's not worth $25 because it's going to cost money to ship it. So it's most of the stuff isn't so valuable anymore that it's worth selling. Yeah, kind of annoying, but peanut butter, good stuff. So I thought, well, I'll just sell the ranch and then I'll start over. Okay, get rid of all the stuff. Plus, if I went out, if the first thing I did is get the money for the ranch, go buy the U-Haul truck. Now I've got a U-Haul truck that I could use to haul all this stuff to the dump. This is a good plan. I was really thinking about that. You know, I'm like, okay, we can make this work. You know. Anyway, so then I thought, well, on the off chance it does happen, there's a few things I would really like to get finished before the ranch sells, just in case, you know. And I don't think the electric KLR was even on the list yet at that time. But I'd always been thinking, someday, if I got to make the KLR electric, that would be a fun project. But I don't know if I really was planning on doing it right away. But like the Delta trike, the solar-powered trike, it was a fun project. It was one of the few things that actually had worked. That was kind of like, that was the turning point from all of the stuff that I tried that didn't work on that project. All of a sudden one did work. Like, working means it actually got to town and back without me having to drag it home by a rope. That happened actually quite a bit. A lot of the other ones, I'd get within a mile of home. I'd get all the way to town, almost home, something catastrophic would break. And I'd be like, okay, I'd found a dog leash on the side of the road one time. I think it was the one that was bright pink. And I realized that the dog leash, had a loop on one end, and I could wrap it around the steering, the handlebars. And then if I just dragged it, I could walk easier pulling it than I could pushing it, and it would tend to follow me. So I called it the turtle leash because the first project was called Turtle. I knew it wasn't going to go very fast, so that was a good name. So I had the turtle leash and I would drag things home. Well, the Delta trike actually made it to town and back. Many times. So it was a good project. The problem was, when the road got really washboardy, which was about 90% of the time, it didn't have suspension, and I built it with motorcycle wheels because I kept breaking bicycle wheels. So the motorcycle wheels were super strong. Never had any trouble with them. Flat tires, but I always get flat tires, so I didn't count that as unusual. If I had ATV tires, I could have aired them down and it would have been a lot smoother. So I was looking at that, but the way I had built this thing was assuming motorcycle wheels. Motorcycle wheels have a axle that goes through them, and then the wheel has its own bearings. If I did ATV wheels, the wheel bolts to an axle, and then you turn the axle with the sprocket and a chain. So it's a completely different layout. So I'd have to start over practically. And I'd have to buy all new stuff. So I kept looking at it. I'm like, well, okay, eBay, I could buy axles, I could buy suspension parts, swing arms, A-arms, shock absorbers, wheels, tires. I could be into it for a few $1,000s by the time I got it to where I really wanted it. And it still would have gone about 15 miles an hour probably. But it, might have been an idea. And then I thought, well, if I sell the ranch, odds are that project would just become metal recycling scrap that I could haul and get a few dollars for the metal. So, if somebody showed up and they had $50,000 and they really wanted to buy the ranch and they're like, can you be out of here in a week? I'd be like, hell yeah, I'll take that money and I'll run. But then I'd be scrambling trying to get rid of all the stupid stuff, right? So I thought, well, I'll look at, the Delta trike. I can let it go, I guess was kind of what I was looking at. So I took that apart and I put all the good parts back in a box, and next to the Delta trike, where I put the Delta trike, was the KLR. And I was looking at it and I'm like, I had dragged it out a few times and it did kind of run, but it had sat for a while, and then the mice chewed through some wires and shorted out the battery and made a just general mess of things. So I did drag it out a couple times, and then I did have it running a little bit. I fixed the wires, replaced the battery. Remembered I liked riding it, but it also had a lot of problems, and so I wasn't really thinking about riding it like long distances. And then I thought, well, that would be a fun project to turn it into electric, because that was an idea I'd had a long time ago, and not think of it as this bike can go 200 miles. This bike could go 20 miles, and it'll be a fun bike again, and I've already got it. And that should be the title for the video, is, and I've already got it. Okay. So, electric KLR has been wildly successful already in that I've used it to go to town and back to get packages. I've used it to haul a gas can full of fuel so that I could run the generator. The last time I took a bicycle with a trailer, I had another flat tire in town. Just didn't feel like messing with it, so I talked to the boss and said, hey, can I throw my stuff in the back of your truck? Oh, yeah, sure. So she gives me a ride home, and then I gave her some stuff I had out here that she needed, so that worked out good. And I haven't rode that bike since. I am so tired of that stupid bike, I mean, I am going to get flat tires on the motorcycle, but they don't just go flat when you look at them funny. It takes, a bigger thorn to go flat. So, yeah, I was kind of at that point. I'm just done with it. I'm just done with a bunch of stuff. At the end of 24, I'm like, end of 2024, I was just like, I'm done with bicycles. I just want a massive change, right? I want not necessarily a cab to sit in and turn on the heater, but I want something that I can carry more than 20 pounds of stuff on. I want something that eventually can get me to the nearest actual grocery store so that I can buy stuff. I want to be able to bring home packages of, parts of things that I need, easily. I want to be able to go to the hardware store on a whim because I need one more bolt of a certain size and I don't have it. Because what happens now, I'll go on eBay and I'll figure out what size of bolt do I actually need, and I'll order it, and it'll be here in a week. And so that part of the project will just stay at that stage, and I hope it's good enough until the new bolt gets here. All right. For the people who remember when I was building the Delta Trike and some of the other ones, there was a bunch of 3/8 bolts that were 1.5 inches too long. And then when I took it apart, I had all of those bolts again, because I knew eventually if it ends up being a successful project, then I will measure the bolts and find the right bolts, order them. A week later they'll get here, but in the meantime it was easier to put something in that's 1.5 inches too long than something that's 1/4 inch too short because the nut doesn't reach. So you just make do, and then if everything else works, then you go back and replace the bolts, kind of thing. Alright. So I mentioned the U-Haul truck idea, and let me just pop one up here as an example. Ta-da! A 2013 10-foot U-Haul truck. The U-Haul one, this is based on a 1-ton full-size GMC van. They do not have duals. I think Penske has a very similar size truck that does have duals. Okay. This is not a very big motor, but it can get between 15 and 18 miles per gallon. Instead of building a van to live in, this has got nice vertical walls and a flat roof. You can stand up in that. Okay. If you wanted a van that you can stand up in, you go get a Sprinter. All of the van lifers are buying Sprinters, and they're hard to find, and they're expensive. I mean, if you had the money, they're easy to find. But there's very few used ones sitting around because they're getting snatched up and people are living in them. All right. And yet this thing, I don't know how long it's been. It's been a few weeks since I saw this one in particular and bookmarked it, and it's still for sale. Nobody's looking at it. I mean, they're not going to be primo, super clean vans, but if you're going to live in something and work on it a little bit and not, for me, I don't want to drive it 12 hours a day anyway. I want something that I can drive out somewhere, park, sit for a couple weeks, like BLM land or something like that, if the ranch sells. If the ranch doesn't sell, it's like, this is like that, I don't know, like a flow chart. If this happens, I got 15 choices. If this happens, I got 13 choices. And I started mapping it out one time, and my brain started to hurt. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, what do I really want? Maybe I should think about that once in a while. And I started thinking, maybe this isn't the best solution. Maybe it is. I don't know. We'll see. So I kind of, started with that flow diagram, and I thought, all right, if somebody shows up with the money and wants to buy the ranch, yeah, I'll take it. But then I started looking again. I'm like, well, what if I stayed, right? Well, then I started working on the electric KLR project. I got to do, well, so far it's mostly been cutting wires. I haven't put anything back together again. And I already knew that motor worked because the motor on the KLR, the electric motor, is the one I just took off of the solar Delta trike. So that was a known. I knew that would work, at least for a while. I don't know if it's going to last a long time, but I just put another 150 miles on it since I've gotten it working. Estimated, but I think that's pretty close because it's 25 miles every time I go to town. And I think I've gone to town 6 times now, so that's about 150 miles. It's adding up fast. I think I had the mileage somewhere. I don't remember if it's on a video or not. Before I started, but, we'll just say it's about 150 miles now. Yeah. What's nice is on the KLR, the odometer is hooked to the front wheel. It's a mechanical odometer and speedometer. So every time I drive the bike, it's counting the miles. So I just have to remember what the miles were when I first switched it to electric. Things that I already have that I need to not forget that I have. Okay. KLR was probably not driven for 5 years. That's when the tags expired. I think I drove it once because I needed parts to get the truck running. So I probably drove it after the tags were expired to go get a fuel pump is what it was for the truck. And I didn't have any other way to get the fuel pump, and the truck was on the side of the road. And I'm like, well, all right. Don't recommend it, but you do what you got to do. All right. And I think I went by every cop in the county on the way to the auto parts store. There was an accident. And I'm cruising by, and I'm like, I mean, you always think, oh, they're going to jump out and grab me. It's like, no. They're busy with an accident. They aren't going to, look at some guy on a motorcycle going by, But you're just like, oh man, there's a target on me. They're gonna know I don't have, they're gonna see that my license tags are expired, I would be a terrible criminal. I'm always assuming that I'm the one that, I'm the one that will get caught doing something stupid. That's the way it always works out. Anyway, got away with it that time. Got the truck running. Yeah. Anyway, so it's probably been 5 years since the motorcycle went anywhere. But I have it, right? It was like, in my mind, it wasn't worth fixing because it had so many things wrong with it. What's fun about the electric version of it, especially now, it doesn't go that fast. So things like the front forks being pretty worn out and leaking, I'm not going 60 miles an hour over the bumps anymore, so they'll probably last another 5 years at 20 miles an hour. All right. Plus, I've had time to think about it, and I'm like, if I slow down, maybe I won't break stuff as much. So I'll probably just slow down going over the bumps. Maybe it'll be okay, and eventually I'll fix it, but not right away. And then I started thinking, man, I really wanted some kind of a car or a truck again. And I'm like, well, 57 years old now, I think, something like that. I only got to make it till June 2029, and then I can pull Social Security at 62. But, I'm excited about that 4.5 years too soon. For me, I would make about $1,000 retirement money. But that's more than I make now. So I'm gonna live it up when that happens. That'll be great, Everybody else is like, oh, I can't live on Social Security, So I really wanted a car or a truck or something, right? Well, now, if I can get, if the new motor works for the KLR and a couple other fiddly things, and if I'm not in a hurry, I can ride that to the hardware store or the grocery store. And now I don't need a car. Okay. So I've kind of taken car and truck off of the immediate list. There's been times where I'm like, oh, I just want, I want to walk out and sit in something and start it up and it works and I don't care, But what do I have and what can I make work? Okay. So, electric KLR, now I don't need the truck right away. Okay. Pickup or U-Haul, really. Ranch is for sale. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't sell. I have had one person come out and look at it. Didn't seem like, that guy really liked it. I think he had seen another one he liked. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to sweat it too much. I'm not going to drop the price, And it just like kind of hit me. It's like, you know what? I got this place about 80% of what I needed. It would be kind of smart if I had just stayed, And this is after I signed a contract to sell it, to list it, So I'm like, well, okay. I decided, this was like, that other long-winded video where if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm okay either way kind of thing. Yeah. So if the ranch sells, we'll get a U-Haul truck or something. If the ranch doesn't sell, we'll stay here. All right. Job. I interviewed for a job with TxDOT, which is Texas Department of Transportation. I could be on one of those road crews, replacing stop signs or running a backhoe or showing up if there's a major accident and helping, putting up cones around the accident so people can drive in the ditch kind of thing or, whatever they do. I got the interview, rode my bicycle 50 miles one way to the interview and then rode it home again. Same day. Fortunately, the interview was at about noon or 11 o'clock or something like that, so I had enough time to get there. I left at daybreak, got there by noon, got home ahead of sundown, If I get the job, I'll have money. I'll probably buy a car then. If I don't get the job, I don't need the car. All right, kind of look at it like that. So that's when I started thinking, oh, I really wanted a car, but I don't need the car until I have the job. All right. If I got the job tomorrow, if somebody calls me up and say, hey, can you start on Monday? Yes, I can do that. What I would do, it's in the next town, I would bicycle there the day before, get a room, stay for, I think they work 4 10s is what I understand. I haven't nailed that down yet, but if they work 4 10-hour shifts, they don't work Mondays usually. So it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. Go get a room for 4 days or 4 nights. Get there the night before. put lights on the bicycle, after work, drive home. Or stay one more night and then drive home. Okay. Now I've got the electric KLR. I could get there in a more reasonable amount of time. Once the KLR is road legal, and I will put lights on it, I could ride that to work and not need the motel. Okay, so this could work out okay. You know, the longer it takes them to hire me, the more ready I will be. But if right now I can ride a bicycle, get a room, do that for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then take my paycheck and go buy some kind of car, and then we go from there. All right. I see a shadow. The sun's up. Yay, sunrise. Okay. It's good to see that once in a while. It happened again. The sun came up. Man, we would be totally screwed if that didn't happen. I mean, as a society, as a world population, you kind of need the sun to come up once in a while. But for me, I just need solar power, so yeah. 7:15, logged it. Okay. Every day I make an entry what time the sun came up. I don't know what I'll do with that, but it's there. Okay, so if we got the job, we'd go buy a vehicle and we can get to work. But in the meantime, we got the electric KLR. That'll get me that far, one way or another. Okay. I know it took me 4 or 5 hours to bicycle to that interview. 50 miles. I think I did better than 10 miles an hour, so maybe it was 4.5 hours. But it was like 20 mile an hour headwind for 20 miles. It sucked. You know, I was like, and you got to expect that. I've done that ride before. And it's every time I've bicycled to Van Horn, it has been epic and it sucked. For all the reasons, right? I ran out of spare tubes on one of the rides. I had tire patch kit and a spare tube. And I ended up bicycling 15 miles on a flat tire. Because after I put the new tube on, I ran through some more thorns. And I had so many holes in that tube, I couldn't find them all. I actually found a bottle of water on the side of the road that I was using to try to find the leaks, and I couldn't patch them all. And I just like, well, okay, it's going to get dark in a couple hours. And I got home after midnight, I think. It was like, that road is just not for the faint of heart, you know. Anyway. Ironically, there's a text dot between me and the motel that I work at. You know, closer to the motel. And there's no job there. There's a job on the other one. Maybe someday I could transfer, you know. Or maybe I won't get the job, you know. Likely I won't get the job, actually. But at least I got to interview. So I made it that far. Could happen. You never know. We don't need the car until we get the job. We don't need... If the ranch doesn't sell, then I have a place to live. Do I move or do I stay? And then the job situation. All right. What would I do if I stayed here? You know, kind of the same kind of thing I've been doing until now, really. And then I had that idea. What would I like? What would be my ideal living situation? And then I happened to see a video with Adam Savage, the guy from Mythbusters, and he's got a channel on YouTube called Tested, if you haven't seen it. If you liked Adam Savage, check out Tested. You know, he's doing some projects, he does some videos where he just answers questions, talks about, you know, the fun stuff they used to do, and, you know, projects, and he's doing projects once in a while and stuff like that. It's just kind of fun to see somebody else's perspective on solving some of the same kinds of problems, you know, in the shop kind of thing. Only he's got, you know, more experience and money. So it's, you know, interesting how to do things. But he had a phrase that he sometimes uses. He's like, okay, you're looking at a problem, you don't know how to solve it. He's like, what would you do if you had a magic wand? And he would say that to somebody he's working with, and they would immediately like, oh, I would do this. He's like, well, why don't you just do that then? He's like, oh, okay. So I'm kind of looking at it like that. It's like, well, okay, if I could wave a magic wand, what would I do? What I find is most times, you know, the idea of having $100,000 in the bank, I mean, that would be nice. You'd be like, well, if something happens, I can just write a check or whip out the credit card and buy the thing because I could, right? But I don't need the money. I need the thing, you know, most of the time. I mean, money by itself is just a tool waiting to do something, right? I think not having money forces me to not necessarily slow down, because I usually still end up spending the money on something, but it makes me think about something and look for a better, more creative way to do something that doesn't cost as much money. You know, if I look around long enough, I usually have something that's close that I could fix and make work. And I've seen a bunch of videos in the last few years where there's a guy that's got a Lotus Esprit that has been, it's completely in pieces. It must have been in horrible shape when he bought it. Roughly the era of the James Bond car, the one that they used as a submarine, right? It drove off the end of the pier and then went down and stayed underwater and did the mission and then came back and drove up on the boat launch, you know, a week later kind of thing. Sort of like that style. And he's like, yeah, every kid wanted that car, you know, even before the James Bond movie, but that was about when that really came out, is, you know, that was the most cool looking car ever, you know. But nobody could afford it, you know, especially as, you know, 20-year-olds. It's like, there's a reason that 20-year-olds can't buy cars like that, usually. So you just like, oh, it's a, you know, you'd have that poster up on your wall. Fast forward a while, that car is just completely trashed. He's able to buy it. And then he spends years taking it apart and fixing one thing at a time. And when it's done, this thing is going to be probably better than showroom, because he has 40 years of experience of all the things that broke on that car before he had it, and so he's going through and making little improvements as he goes, right? So it's going to be a great car. If I think about it later, I'll, you know, maybe put it on screen if you want to go check it out. But just the idea that if you had a little bit of time and some skills, or were willing to learn, you could probably find a broken one of whatever you wanted and fix it instead of buying the new one. And in the process, you would know that thing inside and out. And if something quits working, you'd know how to fix it. That's way better than just paying somebody else to do it, you know, if you enjoy that kind of thing. I mean, not everybody does. And, you know, there was times where, you know, I'd be like, man, I don't want to fix this thing. I want to spend money and I'll pay somebody else to fix it. The problem is anymore, it's like my job at the motel. It's getting harder and harder to find a good person that can do a good job on something, to where you spent the money, but did they do a good job? Or are they in such a hurry to get the job done so they can do the other job? Right? So it's almost like, well, you know, maybe we should learn how to do it ourselves anyway, just in case, you know. So if I could wave my magic wand, I don't want the money. I want what money would give me. And I would spend the money on the tools to build what I want. And then I'd have to go buy some materials, you know. And I've always thought, man, I would really love to have, like, the shop my dad had on the farm, right? I mean, it wasn't massively huge. It might have been 35 or 40 feet long. He had we built a wooden Quonset style shop. concrete floor. He bought the arches, and then I remember as a kid I helped. I helped. I probably got in the way more than anything, but he had us out there, and typical barn raising farm community event. A lot of people showed up and helped stand up the trusses, and the further along we got, probably less people, but then the trusses were standing up, and we had a few guys that knew what they were doing that helped, and got us on the right track, and we got it done. And when I did the motorcycle trip to Alaska, one of the things that I wanted to do is I stopped by the farm and saw it one last time, and the shop was still standing, and it was just kind of cool. It's like, hey, I helped build that, it's still there. So yeah, it would just be, it would be nice to have a place to put my tools, to put my project. End of the night, I could turn the lights off and close the door and not worry about the wind or the rain randomly coming and getting all my stuff wet or blowing it away, or maybe if I can keep the mice out of it, they wouldn't attack everything that I was working on. Although most days I really enjoy sitting out in the sun grinding and welding. It's especially in the winter, what I'm finding is that's kind of why I decided I should quit my job now, because it's nice. It's nice out here now. You do not want to be out grinding and welding in the summer. It's it's hot enough you could just about put the two pieces of metal together and hold them up to the sun, and they would melt themselves together. You don't need the power. You could just stick them together, and the sun would do it for you. I should get a magnifying glass. I wonder if that would work. That would be hilarious. Hey, look, I invented a new way to weld. Only works in Texas. Stay tuned. Here's a prediction for 2025. That should be my thumbnail. I bet everybody would click on that. I don't like clickbait. I really don't. I try to not do that. It's tough though. You end up gaming the system. You have a video and nobody wants to watch it. But it's a good video. You should see it. You got to trick the algorithm so that the robot will tell somebody to watch the video, and then it's a messed up world. I saw another phrase on a video a couple days ago. I just want to slow down and enjoy my life more. Hustle less, enjoy more, and do more at my own pace. And that's what I really feel on the days that I don't go working for somebody else. It's nice to sit here, do a video like this, drink my coffee, enjoy my coffee, eat my breakfast when I'm hungry, not before 7:30 so I have time to get out the door. I'm not working today, in case you're wondering. Sometimes I could create what I want anyway. So don't use the lack as an excuse. Just do it anyway. That was part of the magic wand thing. If I could say, all right, here's the thing I want. Electric motorcycle. Well, I don't have $12,000 to go buy the Zero or whatever they're going for now. But I do have a broken KLR and a go-kart motor, and I tested it originally with electric bike batteries that I had from the other projects, and it worked. And then thanks to people that support the channel, like Houston Firefox and Joseph, they're like, hey, how much are the good batteries? And I'm like, I don't know, let me look it up. A couple days later, the new batteries were here. Thanks, guys. Now we've got enough range, I can get to town and back without even worrying about it. So that's kind of cool. So what would I really like to do if I just said, okay, wave the magic wand? What would be my ideal world like? If you've ever seen, like the movie The Secret, guys like Mike Dooley and a few others were on that movie, and they put the idea in my head that if I really want a thing, it might be possible in maybe not a direct route, but maybe I could get to the thing I really want, right? And part of it is deciding on one thing at a time and focusing on it long enough so you say, okay, this is what I want. And then if you think about every day, then as things happen, maybe you'd see an opportunity that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise, that, oh, this could work. Okay. Or maybe, you know, for instance, like through the channel, I had people donate parts for the motorcycle or donate solar panels that I needed anyway, you know, that they weren't using. And so, okay, they're like, hey, here's this guy out in the desert that could actually use these things that are just in the way right now. You know, they upgraded their system. They didn't know what to do with them. They showed up, plugged them in. Yay, I got more power. You know, that kind of thing, right? But the important thing is to figure out what the heck do you want in the first place. So, this is what I want. I've been figuring it out. There's a couple of channels I've been watching. One is Ass Kustoms, and one is It Kustom, and they actually know each other. They both ended up they're both up in Canada. One guy's I think in Manitoba, and the other guy's somewhere around Vancouver, BC, Canada, not Vancouver, Washington, in case you're curious. Anyway, they both have kind of a hot rod shop, and just watching some of what they're doing, I'm like, oh, that would be fun, right? But instead of making hot rods, I want to make electric hot rods. Because you think about what have I been doing in the last 5 years? Electric bicycles, electric go-karts, electric motorcycle. What's next? Well, we need some kind of an electric hot rod. Okay. So, for example, this is the Aerial Nomad, made in England. It has a Honda motor in the back of it. They originally, the first Aerial was a track car. It looked like it could have been a Formula One car without the bodywork. You know, it had, you know, really low, also a Honda motor. They just turned everything up to 11. You know, it goes incredibly fast and it weighs almost nothing. It's just bonkers. Anyway, and then at some point they came up with the Nomad here. Basically a dune buggy, but again with a Honda motor. Okay. They were meant to be legal in England. They are not U.S. National Highway Transportation Safety Board approved, but in some states you could get them legal. There is a U.S. dealership for them, or you could just buy it as an off-road vehicle. All right. Well, they're over $100,000, and okay, and they don't even have a body. You know, I think they have. You can get a windshield for them, I think. You know, but it'd be a motorcycle that doesn't tip over as often. You know, same experience, right? But out here, that would be the perfect vehicle for the road that I drive on every day. You know, my biggest challenge living out here is the first 8 miles of the road. Everything else is fine. You know, it's the first 8 miles. So anything I build has to survive the first 8 miles. This would thrive on that road. You could hit cattle guards at 80 miles an hour and fly. You know, that'd be great. But, you know, I don't need a $100,000 go-kart. What I need is the tools to build my own. And then make it electric. Because reasons, right? So, after watching these guys building hot rods for a while, I started Googling and finding other channels. And there is guys that are buying wrecked electric cars and transplanting those motors and battery packs and all of the related systems into other cars. So, a Nissan Leaf was the most popular electric car until Tesla came along. There is a lot of Nissan Leafs out there. I think the original 4 or 5 years only had 100 miles range. So I got excited about that. Then I realized if I wanted to go to El Paso, I would have to have a tailwind to actually make it to El Paso in a Nissan Leaf. And I wouldn't want to run a Leaf on this road anyway. Once I got to El Paso, then I could hook it up to a charger and do my shopping and then come back. And then it would take, I think, a month of all of my solar power to recharge the car. I'd have no lights, for a month to get the car charged and then take it back to El Paso to get groceries again. So that kind of put the kill on that deal. But then I got to thinking about it. It's like, yeah, I see this video of the guy buys a wrecked Leaf. The car was immaculate except for the front 4 feet was just completely gone, right? But everything electrically worked still. The battery pack wasn't damaged. The motor, for some reason, didn't get hit. It was like, it was all the parts he needed worked. Okay. And so he's going to take that, and I guess that series is done. I just happened to find it. He's putting it in another Nissan Frontier pickup, the little pickup, I think. I haven't seen all of them yet, but, it's like, okay, yeah, so you pick 2 or 3 cars that you know how to work on, or once you learn the basics on the first one, they all work kind of the same, right? So a person could take the battery pack and the motor and then build a tube chassis like this and make a fun little project out of it, right? I've seen some other videos recently where guys, did the same kind of thing. Just take, get a tubing bender and a welder and you start building a chassis, and then you buy the wheels and you buy some suspension parts, or you find another vehicle. Like, if you bought, in this case, they used Honda parts. Okay, so you buy the motor and the transmission from Honda, or you buy they were doing it new construction, so they were buying just crate motors. But for making 1 or 2, you just go to the wrecker, buy a wrecked car that had, if you bought the whole car, it would have the motor and the transmission, brakes, wheels, tires, suspension, instrument cluster, seats, right? And then you build the parts that you don't have on the car, and then you put it together, and okay. In Texas, there is what they called assembled vehicle registration. So there is already a process that you can create, it was made to in kind of encompass kit cars and, the old, was it the Manx? Dune buggy from the old James Bond movies, based on a Volkswagen chassis, tub. They didn't really call it a chassis. It was the floor pan of a Volkswagen, fiberglass body on it, and they made a little dune buggy out of it. Okay. So there's a process to do that. You do the build, you take the pictures, you show that it was done, and then all of the build is inspected. So you have to go find a master mechanic, I think is what they said. It can't just be, some guy on the corner. It's got to be a ASC certified mechanic. And then you bring along your binder of, here's where the parts came from, here's the VIN numbers, here's the registration. So when you bought the wrecked car, it's got a VIN number and you get a bill of sale for it. Okay. And that's where the motor came from. And then, like, for instance, you can't use motorcycle parts on a car. I've heard of people making that mistake. They built a little car. It didn't weigh more than 1,000 pounds, so they put motorcycle brakes on it. No. It has to be car brakes if it's a car. So you just look for stuff like that. Anyway. That's the kind of project living out here I could do. If I sold the ranch, that was what I figured out about a week after I had the guy put up the sign for selling the ranch. I'm like, when I got the Delta trike working, that was the first thing that really worked. Everything before that didn't work. all of a sudden now I've got one thing that works, and I'm going to sell the ranch, and I've just closed the door on being able to do that. I'm like, oh, the irony. But I was in a point where I don't have any money. If I sell the ranch, I have money. If I keep the ranch, I don't have any money, so I can't do it anyway. So we'll see what happens. This is one possibility. Okay. The other angle is you buy something like a Nissan Leaf, or you buy a wrecked Tesla. Now, even a wrecked Tesla is a lot of money because people know that battery pack is incredibly valuable. And if the battery pack wasn't damaged, it's massive. You know, you could run your ranch off of a battery pack like that. You know, that's one of the ideas, is you buy the whole battery pack, hook it up to your solar system. There's guys that are doing that. Now you got all the batteries you need, right? Or you take it apart and you just take part of the battery pack even. You can buy modules, smaller sections of it. Yeah. So there's a whole market that's popped up. It's just like, you know, any other auto wrecker that disassembled cars and is selling fenders. And then, you know, there's a lot of people that are all complaining, oh, you know, all these electric cars, it's just going to be hazardous waste. It's like, no. There's people that aren't ignorant like you that have figured out that, you know what, that motor out of a Tesla would be a great hot rod motor. The battery pack is worth a lot of money. It's valuable to a lot of people. It's not going to go end up in the landfill. You know, even if you break it down to the individual cells, they're valuable. You know, it's not just going to end up in the landfill, not like your old Chevy did. You know, your old Chevy is actually worthless. The Tesla's going to be worth something when it's broken. Yeah. That's so good. If the ranch doesn't sell, so if I kind of just draw this zigzag line, we got the motorcycle working, we're going to finish that. Instead of the U-Haul truck, it's just one day I'm just standing outside looking, bunny comes out from under the bus. This was so funny. The bunnies are wild. I don't feed them. They're not my pets, but they live under the bus, and one of them dug a hole under the house. Okay. They're so used to me that they kind of forget that I'm here. And if you're standing still, it's kind of like, it goes both ways. If the bunny is standing still, they camouflage pretty well. I'll be looking right at them and not even see them. And then all of a sudden they'll twitch, and you're like, oh, the bunny's right there. You know, but it's just blended right in. And if I'm standing still, the bunny will walk right up to me and not realize I'm there. It's weird, you know. And then they'll finally get too close, and I'll wiggle my toes, you know, just move my boot enough for the gravel to crunch, and then they just freak out and just run away, you know. And it's like, okay, hey bunny, you know. But even if I'm talking, because like I'll be talking on these videos, they get used to the sound of my voice, I think. And so I'll say, hey bunny, what are you doing? And you'll see his ears twitch, and he'll look, but he doesn't see you. And he'll just walk right up to you. It's like, what are you doing? You know? Yeah. So they're pretty funny. Anyway, I'm sitting there enjoying the sun in the morning. Happen to look over at the bus, see the bunny come walking out, and I'm looking at the bus a little bit, and I'm like, right? And this started a while ago, but it's like, oh, it's an idea, but it's a lot of work, or this, or that, or whatever. And I got to thinking about it. It's like, if I stayed here, there's a lot of these little projects that I put off, but if I did some of them, I could make this pretty nice here. I mean, I could make it nice enough that I'd want to stay, right? I used to live in the bus. One of the ideas was I'd have to build a shed first because the bus is just completely full of stuff. If I moved all of the stuff out of the bus into the shed, I could set up like a little apartment in the bus, live in the bus, not live in the house, and then I could move all the stuff out of the house and finish the house. I don't like drywall, but, I could do something instead of just plastic over the fiberglass insulation, right? So it would be finished. Maybe something like tongue and groove pine board would be kind of cool in here, or something like that. I haven't decided yet. Don't have the money for it, so it's not a high priority, but it's on the list, right? Also, if you do tongue and groove pine board, it's not heavy. Drywall is heavy, and I'm like, I don't want to mess with that, but pine board, you can pick it up one board at a time. So if I end up being 70 by the time I do it, I can still do it. I got the brad nailer and an air compressor. We just bop it up one piece at a time. It could happen. Okay. But I was kind of looking at the bus again. I'm like, well, if I wanted to buy... Where was it? Let me go find it again. If I already wanted to buy the U-Haul truck for $10,000, I've got the bus. It's already paid for. I already paid $4,000 for it. It's got a high enough ceiling I can stand up in there. Why do I need a U-Haul truck if I've got the bus? All right. So I just kind of, I just literally, I was sitting there with my coffee cup about halfway up to my mouth, and my eyes went out of focus, and I just started imagining what I could do with the bus that would fit some of the other ideas I had. Okay. So I didn't take the time to find, let's see if we can find something here. Google. There we go. There's a bus. Let's see if we can find that one. There we go. There's our side view picture of a bus. Good enough. Okay. What I'm thinking, hang on, I will prepare this and I'll come back. Pause. All right, and we're back. Okay, not high art, but we went over to the aerial website and we found, oops, oh, that's a good picture. Oh, I'm sure now it's not going to load. Anyway, I got that side view off of there, and so here's our aerial, which for whatever reason I couldn't find that actual picture. That was perfect, but and then we took our school bus. Oh, hang on, pictures are not loading. I'm losing interest in this already. Oh, I think I see what the problem is. There we go. Okay. So we started with that, and then we grabbed a side view from the aerial website, and we bopped it together. Okay, so what I'm thinking, and this could be a multi-year project depending on how fast I jump on it, but we've already got the school bus. There is a process in Texas that you can re-register something like a school bus or an actual school bus into a RV motorhome. Okay. If it's a school bus, you need a bus driving license, and then you'd need the insurance for driving a school bus. It's just a mess. Okay. But all these surplus buses are out there, so they said, okay, here's the things you have to do. It can't be marked school bus. You can't have the flashing lights, I think, on there. And then if you're going to make it a motorhome, it's got to have, I don't remember, it needs like running water and an electrical system and a toilet or something like that. And you could buy a porta potty and bungee it down, and they'd say, okay, that's good enough. I've heard stories about that. Okay. So you'd want to spend the time, figure out the process, but this has happened before. You can go buy the bus, you can do some stuff, convert it, make it into an RV. Okay. Well, I don't need a 54-passenger school bus. Now, I bought it originally because when I was researching it last time, everybody was like, yeah, get the biggest bus you can get because you always end up needing more space than you think you're going to need. Okay. It's kind of a pain in the butt to drive around in the full-length school bus. I'm used to driving bicycles, so I wouldn't necessarily want to drive very far in the fully converted school bus. But I have seen people do this where basically the bus is made up of sections that are riveted together. I was an aircraft mechanic. I know how to take out and put in rivets. So, that's not difficult, but I've done thousands of rivets in my life, so it's not a big deal. So what I was looking at, if I turned the school bus into a flatbed, and I've seen people do this, you know, it's rated for a lot of weight because, you know, kids and their backpack full of, you know, snacks and books or whatever. They're super heavy duty. So you chop it off, you chop a section out of the middle, you take the rear wall and you just move it all the way forward, you match the two sides up, rivet it back together. And then you got the frame rail sticking out the back. Then you just make either a flatbed or a ramp truck. You know, a ramp truck is something all the race car guys, you know, the smaller race car guys, they just get this long tail out the back of their truck that angles down. They put out a couple little beaver tail ramps, get the race car on it and winch it up or drive it up, whichever. And then they go to the next racetrack and they roll it down. And then you got the front of the ramp truck. In this case, you'd have enough room for, you know, you could make a little bunk room in there and sleep or something like that. So I was like, okay, if I was going to do the U-Haul truck anyway, and I've already got the school bus, this might actually work. And then if I get the idea that, I don't know that I would build electric hot rods as a business, but it might be a fun hobby. As soon as I try to make money with something, it takes the fun out of it. But if I do it as a fun project, there's YouTube content. And if I make one of everything for my own amusement, you know, I probably will not sell the electric KLR unless somebody got really excited about it. But I showed everybody how I did it, and then they can do it themselves. Okay. Great. So that's an idea. I'm like, okay, I've already got the bus. It ran when parked. It needs some work. But it's a project that I could do. And it's possible that I can move it. It's not... I mean, I built the shop on one side of the bus and the house on the other, but I keep looking at it. As long as I can get the bus to go straight out, it won't hit the shop. And there's 4 feet between the house and the bus, you know. And even if I hit the shop a little bit, I probably don't care, you know, the little shed that's out there. All right. Once we get the bus out in free space, then I can deal with, you know, all of the other ideas. And if I had the bus, especially like this with a flatbed on the back, I could use, I mean, then that's like a giant pickup, right? I've got a flatbed that I could go buy wood to build sheds. I could buy steel for welding projects. I could throw a water tank on the back and haul water if I needed water. And I could take it camping, right? Once it's registered as an RV, because I think that's the most likely. I would register it as an RV, not plan on driving it very often because it got 4 miles to the gallon. That's one of the reasons I never got too excited about it. I got it out here. It was a great place to live. I lived in it for 2 or 3 years, I think, before I built the house. It was, you know, up off the ground. It didn't leak. Well, until I broke the vent, and then it leaked, but then I fixed the vent, and it didn't leak again. It wasn't very warm, but it had all the windows. That was one of the things that I liked about it, is sitting in the bus, I had 360 windows. I mean, they were all the way around, you know. It was kind of cold, not insulated very well, and the windows all leaked. Air would blow through it, the wind would blow through it, a lot of dust came through. That could be fixed, you know. But they're indestructible. I mean, if I was ever, you know, if I saw a tornado coming, I'd just go sit in the bus, you know. You'd probably be fine. It's, you know, compared to the house, yeah, night and day. Made to keep kids alive, so pretty much indestructible. Anytime I'm up on the roof, I don't worry about, oh, walk gently. I mean, you can just jump up and down on the roof. It's, you know, especially with that dome shape, it's really strong up there. You know, you could park a car on the roof and it wouldn't budge. It's crazy. I mean, a bus could be upside down and not crush. Yeah. So, possible project. Drag the bus out, eventually cut the body down. We would take out, I think I figured I could take 20 feet out, roughly how this picture is. And I'd still have 10 feet from the front windshield to the back window of livable space, and then 20 feet of flatbed space. A full-size pickup is roughly 20 feet long. So the way I'm looking at this, if I built something like this and then decided to do the electric hot rod projects, this is how I would go drive to town, look at a Craigslist ad or something like that, find somebody's Nissan Leaf or a Prius or something that they were selling cheap, load it up on here, drag it out here, right? And, by the time I got to that point, hopefully I'd have some kind of income. If you buy a car that doesn't run for $2,000, $1,000, you've got all the parts you need to put something else together. If it doesn't run, you get it for cheaper. You take something like this and you go get it. Even if it costs me whatever for gas, it would cost me more to pay a wrecker to bring a vehicle out to me. Okay. And then, if I decide I want to take an adventure, right? I've got a bus that I can live in. I could drive out, well, I already live in the desert, so I'd probably find somewhere with trees, or, go drive through a national park, or go find some BLM land or forestry land, or, something like that. Go sit still for a week, right? Be somewhere else. It'd be nice. That's kind of what my thought is anyway, is if the ranch sells, I would go park in the forest somewhere, And yes, 4 miles to the gallon, not good, but if you only went 50 miles and then sat still for a week, then 4 miles a gallon doesn't hurt as bad. If you were going to drive coast to coast as fast as you could, yeah, don't take a school bus. It'll cost you a fortune. I figured that out one time. I was like, geez, what year was Hurricane Katrina? I had a Chevy Astrovan, and I drove from Washington State all the way down to Baton Rouge and a few places in between. And I found Hurricane Katrina, survivors, and I had my camera, and I did a video series, or a video, just talking to people and getting their stories, right? And I'm like, man, the next time I do that, I want to take a school bus. I could have my whole edit studio in there, and I could have people sit in the bus, and we could talk in there, and I could have lights set up and just make it, a permanent recording studio or something. And I started, I joined some school bus forums, and I started doing all the research. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of hit me, and it ruined the whole idea. I'm like, if I took a school bus all the way across the country, the amount of money I would spend on gas, I could buy something. I mean, I don't think the Prius was out yet then, but I could, go buy a Honda Fit that gets 50 miles to the gallon, and I could stay in a motel every night, and it would cost me less to stay in the motel than it would take to take the bus. Yeah, don't do the math if you have an idea, because it'll ruin everything for you. Yeah. So that was when I decided not to buy the bus the last time, and then coming out here, I bought the bus because I just figured I'd drive it one time and then not drive it again. But yeah, I don't know. Instead of thinking, okay, I need a car, well, no, I've got the electric KLR. That'll fill the gap. I don't need the U-Haul truck. I've already got the bus. I can put the bus back together, fix a few things. Even if I spend $1,000 on the bus instead of $10,000 on the U-Haul truck, the only place the U-Haul truck would really have a huge advantage is it gets way better gas mileage. But I don't want to make the U-Haul truck my daily driver either. If I drive to El Paso one day a month and come back with enough supplies to make it worth the trip, that's fine. And if I drive the bus maybe once every other month, then it's cost effective again. Well, like for instance, if you buy steel, you can buy steel in 20-foot or 40-foot length, right? If you got a 20-foot piece, I think they store it in 20 and 40-foot lengths at the steel place. because there's a 40-foot tractor trailer that could deliver it to you in one piece, basically. If I buy steel, well, lately I've been buying steel in 4-foot pieces so they can mail it to me. It's not really cost effective, you know. You can buy it in 10-foot pieces, and then they cut it in half or out of a 40-foot or whatever. Well, this would have, I measured it, if I left myself 10 feet in the front and 20 feet sticking out the back, I could buy a 20-foot piece of steel. And they just put it on the back for me. You know, they get the forklift, they bring it out, set it on the flatbed, and, you know, then I could build all kinds of stuff out of that, right? I could build a go-kart. It'd be great. And it'll be electric. Yeah. Other project that has been rattling around in my head, I may have talked about this a bunch. I don't remember how much. I talk about things and I don't always upload them, so I don't remember if this got up or not. There's a company up in Canada, a couple young guys, well, younger than me. They were logging truck drivers. I guess they still technically are logging truck drivers. They formed a company called Edison Motors. And it's been funny because if you know anything about electricity, Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla were the two pioneers of electricity when electricity was becoming like a thing, right? And they were always stealing each other's ideas, and there was a lot of rivalry, and it was almost like VHS and Beta. One of them really liked AC power, and one of them liked DC power, and they're completely not compatible. And it became pretty clear pretty early that if this was going to be a national thing where we had a national grid, somebody had to make a decision which one was going to win, because you couldn't have AC power and DC power on the grid. You'd have to have two grids, and then that's just a mess. All right. Anyway, so Tesla cars is obviously well known, and so when they created their electric truck company, they called it Edison after, you know, so it's like, it's almost backwards. You would think Edison cars would be more well known instead of Tesla, you know, because Edison is the guy that basically won, and Tesla had all the other ideas that nobody heard of. A lot of people forget about Nikola Tesla. Anyway, so these guys up in Canada, they created a electric logging truck building company because they kept thinking that's what would work the best for them. Okay, there's a bunch of advantages to having an electric truck. The obvious disadvantage is battery range. Okay, that's what always gets the sticking point. But if you had that problem solved, an electric motor has massive amounts of torque, and they needed a lot of torque because they're up hauling in the mountains. So you've got, you know, wherever the log was cut, they have the camp there, and then you got to pull that up the hill to get out of camp, and then you come down a long hill, and then you go up another hill, and you come down a long hill, and usually the logging mill where they deliver the logs to is down in the valley where the town is, or close to a river so they could float the logs out back in the day, or where the train was so they could cut the lumber and put it on a train and send it somewhere, or close to the coast where they could load it on a big ship and go somewhere. Okay. Most of those are down low. Trees grow up high. Okay. Well, they got to thinking about it, and they're like, if you had an electric logging truck, you'd go up the first hill and then you come down. If we had regen, that thing would have completely charged its batteries by the time you got to the bottom of the hill. And then you'd unload the logs, so now you don't weigh as much. You go back up the hill, empty. You would use less power going up the hill, so your batteries could get you back up the hill. And then you get another load of logs. You'd need enough power to get up the first hill. And then you'd come down the hill, and you'd have regen. And regen is just the engine, the electric motor, turned into a generator to help slow you down. And instead of dragging the brakes all the way down the hill like everybody else, regen is slowing you down, but taking that energy and putting it back in the battery. It's not 100% efficient, but if you just drag your brakes all the way down the hill, you're burning out your brakes. You're just blowing brake dust everywhere. So that's 0% efficient. You're completely throwing away all of that energy from coming down the hill, and you're just making heat and noise and dust. That's just costing you money. So why not have regen that's only 80% efficient? Maybe it's 60%. It doesn't even matter. You're getting something out of it. That's recharging the battery to go back up the hill. Well, since they were pretty smart and a little bit more realistic, they're like, well, that would be great if it was pure electric, but that's not really going to work in the bush, and there's no grid out in the bush where they were. So you needed some way to keep the battery charged, and it didn't make sense to have to sit there and plug into a generator, or if you had enough batteries when you got down to the mill, you could plug in at the mill and recharge. But that would be extremely expensive to have that many batteries just to get all the way back up to the camp, and then they'd move the camp, and then you wouldn't have enough batteries again. Okay. Plus, charging, you're sitting still. You're not making money when you're sitting still. And depending how far the camp was, maybe you can make 3 or 4 trips. Go up, get the loads, come back down, drop it. That's one trip. Keep doing 3 or 4 loops in a day. You get paid by the load or by the pound. However they figure it out. So you make as many trips as you can, right? So nobody's going to want to sit there for 4 hours recharging your electric logging truck just to get another load. It doesn't make sense. Okay. So they said, well, okay. The logging truck needs a massive motor to pull a useful load up the first hill, right? But then after that, it doesn't need that much power to go back up when it's empty, and they're almost always going from high to low elevation. So they started looking at it, and they realized that an electric generator, diesel-powered electric generator mounted where the original logging truck engine was, could be smaller in capacity. It would burn about half as much fuel, and a generator is set up to run at its most efficient power range. If you've ever been around a diesel truck, like a semi, they're going through the gears constantly because the diesel has a fairly short power range window. It's really efficient if you can get it there, so they'll have a 13-speed transmission or something like that, and he'll accelerate from a stop, get it up to that range, and then immediately drop it into second, and then zip, shift, zip, shift, zip, all the way up to 60 miles an hour. And then he'll cruise along at his efficient range, and then he gets to the slightest hill, and he's got to drop a gear, and then drop another gear. And then he comes down the other side, and he's got to drop another gear to slow down again, right? So they're constantly shifting. It's rare to sit still. Now the new trucks are automatic, although from the driver's point of view, it's an automatic. The truck is actually still a manual with a computer that's doing the shifting for you. It's constantly shifting. You just put it in drive and don't think about it. You don't even have a clutch. The computer, the truck actually has a clutch still. It's not an automatic transmission like your car, from what I understood. I'm not a diesel mechanic, but I did have a CDL for a few weeks. So I kind of know what it's like to drive them a little bit. Not a professional driver. Well, I guess if you're a CDL. I never felt like I quite fit in there. Anyway, what they figured out is a diesel electric generator could run at its peak efficiency and burn less fuel than a diesel-powered logging truck. And the diesel motor driving, the diesel engine driving the electric generator could use half as much fuel over the day as what the diesel-powered logging truck would use. Because it was a smaller motor, it only ran at peak efficiency, charged up the battery pack, and then shut off. So one of the biggest complaints about things like logging trucks, because they had such big motors, is when they come into the logging mill, it's really loud, right? And they'd have noise ordinances, so maybe they couldn't even run them after dark, or after, they could have all the lights in the world and drive in the bush in the dark, but the cities started, saying, oh, we don't want these noisy trucks running after midnight. Okay. Now, I don't know if anybody would go logging in the middle of the night, but if you had a quiet truck, you could at least get out of the mill and not make any noise. Maybe there would be an advantage to that. Okay. So what they came up with is a new way of looking at a truck. Instead of having the motor in the front, it's just the diesel running an electric generator. Then instead of the big massive fuel tanks that they would usually have, they put batteries. Well, they still needed a fuel tank for the generator, but they needed less of a fuel tank for the generator. And then between the frame rails, they put the batteries, because there's not a drive shaft going down the middle anymore. They just run the high voltage wires all the way back to where the axle was. And there's companies that are making an electric axle already. This is the thing, is all of these parts existed. It's just nobody in North America was making an electric truck using them for whatever reason. Yeah. They're like, why is nobody doing this? It's like the parts were already made. They just literally, they jumped on an airplane, they went over to China, met some of the factory reps, and put an order in for 3 or 4 of the parts they needed to build the prototype. And within a month or whatever, the parts showed up in BC, where they were at. And they started building their first truck. And they're like, why is nobody doing this? It's just like, they're building the first one. They have built the first one in a tent in the backyard of one of the guy's parents on their property. Kind of like, if you've ever seen this, Tesla and SpaceX both were using giant Quonset-sized tents as their factory. And then as they proved that the design was working, then they built the factory. But it's both Elon Musk, but Tesla cars, some of their factories had sections that were just tents. And then as the money came in, then they built the factory. It's like, why spend the money if you don't have to until you prove it, right? Anyway, so the idea is electric generator, recharges the battery, you just go buy diesel fuel, you drive your logging truck. You just use less fuel, and you've got way more torque, and you're not shifting constantly. This thing just goes. You got a throttle and a brake, and they set it up on the inside so that any driver would sit in it and feel comfortable. It's already got what they're looking for. You just don't got the clutch. And it just goes. And it works. A little bit of tuning in the beginning to get things to work right, like anything else. But they've already moved logs with it to test it, and then they've done some other stuff also. But they just, the guy, he was already a logging truck driver when he started the company, and so he's used to how much, you look at the size of the load, he jumps in it, and it just goes. He's like, are we still hooked up? Literally, it was just like, because, if you pull in a really heavy load, you'd be like, okay, you got to feather the clutch a little bit and a little bit more gas, and you feel yourself leaning into it to get it to go kind of thing. And it's just like, it was effortless. He's like, it's almost like driving an electric golf cart. You just kind of forget the load is back there, With the electric axles, they're making a tri-axle. So instead of it just having a single rear axle or 2 rear axles in tandem, they put 3 on there. I think that's one of the ones they're doing next for a customer, for like an oil rig kind of a place that's going to be out picking up like the oil derrick or something like that, to move a big load. You need more power? Just give it another axle. The power is coming from the axle. You're not running all of the power through the drive shaft to where you'd actually, twist a drive shaft, which happens sometimes, or you twist an axle. But they just completely removed the drive shaft, and so that's one less failure point. So the E-axle itself is rated to a load, And it's just a few bolts and a couple of wires. I mean, they're big giant wires, but if you ever had a problem with the e-axle, you just replace one and then you could get it rebuilt. Okay. So why is any of that important? What if by the time I'm ready and they're still in the prototyping stage, but they're already talking, they're taking the same idea as the semis and making pickups kits. They're prototyping still. They haven't got the first one done yet, but they're close on the first one. And what they're looking at is setting up dealerships or installers all over North America and eventually the world that will be certified by them on how to do the job, to, you're doing high voltage electrics. You need to be, trained on how to do it, not die, basically, or not how to kill your customers kind of thing. But the same idea, let's say you had a tow truck. I don't even know. It could cost you $250,000 maybe to buy one by the time you got it all outfitted, right? Eventually you wear out the driveline on the tow truck, but the rest of the truck is probably fine. All right. So instead of scrapping the whole truck and starting over, you pull out the driveline, you put in the electric axle in the back, and you buy the generator pack in the front, and then you buy a couple battery packs, and somebody assembles it for you because it's not quite do-it-yourself yet. And then you've got more torque than the original truck had. You cut your fuel burn probably in half. And in the case of a tow truck, because of the battery system that's on there, if somebody in a Tesla has a dead battery 50 miles from town, they end up getting towed back to town to the nearest charging station. But if your electric tow truck already had a high voltage system on it and a generator, and I've seen people talking about this already, you could just pull up next to the Tesla. If everything else was fine, you just unhook your little wire and you go over there and you plug it into the Tesla, start your generator, and recharge the guy. And then, a Tesla knows, because it's got maps and stuff and GPS, the Tesla driver knows exactly where the next charging station is and how many miles it is and how much battery he needs to get there. So you just give him 10% more than he needs to make sure he gets there. Unplug him, swipe the card, you got your money. You didn't even have to hook him up to the tow truck. You just give him a jump start, because you've got the generator that can do it. You're driving an electric tow truck. This is genius, right? So you just future-proofed your business. Teslas don't break down near as often as other cars because they just have less things that break down. But, it's no different than running out of gas or getting to work and realizing you forgot to plug in your cell phone. You're like, oh, crap, I didn't charge my phone last night, so now my phone is dead. It's going to be the same with your electric car. It's no different. Doesn't make you a moron. Everybody forgets to, buy gas once in a while. You get to where you're going and realize you don't have enough to get to the next gas station. So you call AAA and they bring you 5 gallons of gas or whatever, all right? Or you walk. Either way. Since everything I am doing, I'm trying to do it with electric anyway, the motor on the bus still runs, or it ran 7 years ago when I parked it. Yeah, I haven't drove it since probably sometime after April 2017. Okay, so it's been at least 6 or 7 years. And the mice have chewed all the wires, and the mice have chewed completely through the radiator hose. Like there's chunks of radiator hose completely missing from the mice, and the rats figured out that they liked drinking the coolant, so they chewed through the hose, and then they couldn't reach, and so they just kept, there was a foot of radiator hose missing. It was there before because I drove it. It's just like they just kept chewing it further and further back until they couldn't get to the antifreeze anymore. That's supposed to be bad for mice, but taste good, so I guess they didn't figure it out that it was killing them fast enough. And then the next mouse comes along and is like, geez, look at all this good coolant. I'm gonna drink some of that. Yeah. Anyway, that's probably the same mice that are dying in my water barrels because they're dying of dehydration because the coolant is... I think that's how that works. The coolant makes them dehydrate, and so then they try to drink a lot of water, and then they drown in the water barrel. So you fish them out. Yeah, found 2 in the last week again. Yeah, go figure. It's kind of a problem that takes care of itself eventually. But they keep having more mice, and so there's nobody within half a mile one way and 10 miles the other way, so I'm the only source of shelter and coolant, I guess. So anyway. So, instead of 4 miles to the gallon on my bus, my bus is gas powered. I think it's a 360 motor. One of the guys that I used to work with explained it to me because I didn't really know. He's like, it was, because I told him what it was, when I bought it on the Craigslist ad. I'm like, it's this. He's like, oh, okay, that is, on my bus, it is the smallest motor that GM made on the big block casting, right? So it's the same casting as the 454, but mine is the smallest version of that. Okay. And it still gets 4 miles to the gallon. Okay, whatever. It was geared low. I think it maxed out at 55 miles an hour. I drove it from San Antonio, so it was like 500 miles. I just stopped at every gas station on the way, and I just kept swiping the credit card, and 60-gallon gas tank, and, got it here. I'm like, I ain't never driving this sucker again, right? Yeah, and it's sad. I moved it twice. Where I first parked, and then I moved it to where I was parked for a while, and then I moved it to where I'm at now. And then it's just sat there for years. All right. Yeah. But, what if, by the time I'm ready for it, if the Edison guys have a kit... Now, from what I've heard, it's probably going to be something like $30,000 to switch it to electric. So, I don't know that I would drive it enough that would be worth doing. If I only drove it X amount of miles a year, I did the math, I probably wouldn't live long enough, and I don't drive it enough days to make it worth doing for $30,000. Okay. So maybe I wouldn't do it. We'll see. However, as a motorhome, you'd have this big generator and a big battery pack. So when you got to where you were going to camp for a week, plus you could have solar on the roof, but that generator could charge up the battery, and you could run your toaster and your microwave and your rice cooker and your computers probably for a week or two just on batteries, and not even, and not run them dead because the batteries are big enough to drive the whole bus, right? This is the thing that I hope catches on, is an electric motorhome, right? I looked at this a couple of years back and I was like, man, if that ever happens, that's going to be the holy grail, because, most people in motorhomes don't drive near as much as they think they're going to. A lot of motorhomes just sit in RV parks and never drive again, or you drive from one RV park to the next. Well, when you get to the RV park, you plug in. You got 50 amp service, so you can run your big giant heat pump air conditioners, right? Well, that 50 amp service could easily recharge your battery to drive. Okay. So let's say you got your electric motorhome, you pull into an RV park, you sit there for a week, you enjoy their showers, so you don't use your shower because it's, your RV shower is really small, and then it's time to go somewhere else, and so you just jump in and you drive away quietly because your batteries were fully charged while you were sitting there. and then you drive for 2 hours, you get to the next RV park, and you sit there for a week, and you plug in. In theory, a person could drive from RV park to RV park and never burn any fuel, and you'd be taking your house with you. That's the dream, you know. But if we did the Edison system, you just stop and buy diesel once in a while, and you're taking your charging station with you. So that's kind of the best of both worlds. And when you get to where you're going, you just sit there and you've got this big old giant battery pack. And if you had solar on the roof, I mean, realistically, if we didn't cut the bus in half, if we had the full length of the bus, we'd have about 30 feet of roof space, something like that. And if we covered that in big giant solar panels, and if you had a wing that had more solar panels that stuck out, I think if you drove, I've done the math a few different ways, plus the school bus is heavy and not very efficient, but if you sat still a week, you might get enough solar to drive an hour. Okay. But if you're retired and you're not in a hurry, yeah. Or every time, because you need to go to the Walmart anyway to buy fuel or to buy food and, you know, whatever. So you go to the Walmart, you buy your stuff. Walmarts are starting to put in fast chargers now. So while you're shopping, you plug your bus or your RV into the fast charger, you get it topped off. And then you need water again, you know, so you got to dump your tanks and buy, you know, so you dump your black water tank and your gray water tank, and then you fill up your fresh water tank, and you buy food and you recharge the battery. So, and then you go out and you park in the desert again, or the forest, or wherever you want to go. So if once a week you had to come in and dump your tanks and get more food anyway, not a big deal to either get more diesel or to plug into a charger. And then you drive for a couple hours to the next place you wanted to camp. Maybe before you actually went out in the bush, you'd hit a charger and recharge, or get more fuel and fire up the generator. You know, drive. If you drove for an hour, the way they sized the generator on the Edison truck that they were prototyping, they drove, I'm going to spitball the numbers, I don't remember exactly, but if you drove on generator for an hour and then shut the generator off, you could drive another hour on battery only. And then you'd start the generator for an hour and then shut it off for an hour. Okay, something like that. And then it's just a matter of how big of a generator do you need, how big of a battery do you need. You know, they could go up or down on the scale. You could add more batteries. And in some operations, they were saying, like one of their trucks is going to be a snowplow truck. And since they don't run the snowplow truck very often, only when it's snowing, they could have the truck plugged into the grid to recharge it, so that it would go out with a full battery and do part of the day's work and then start the generator to keep going. And then when they came back, because they know how many miles they can go on a battery, they would just shut the generator down, drive the rest of the way back on battery only, get back to the yard, and plug it in. Because grid power is cheaper than burning the generator. But if you needed it to run continuously, you've got the generator. So you just burn some diesel and you make power and the thing keeps going. You know, so they got the best of both worlds. They could grid charge it if they wanted to. And for the logging trucks that are never going to see the grid, they just don't even install that option. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. So that's the world of electric trucks and school buses and all that kind of stuff. So for me, what do I want to do for 2025? One of the projects is going to be, I'm going to start looking at the bus. There's a few things I need, like a big jack, because I've got one flat tire. It's completely off the beat. It's been like that for years. Okay. If I got the bus running, I know I could drive it a few hundred feet on the flat tire. And that tire is just crap. It's all checked, weather checked, so I'm not going to hurt the tire, right? So I might do that anyway. I have to jack the bus up though, because I got the bus on stabilizing blocks. I made some wooden blocks years ago, So when you walk in the bus, it doesn't rock, right? And I basically maxed out what I could do with my floor jack. I've got a floor jack from when I used to have my pickup. And I was able to lift the bus enough to build these blocks underneath the frame and then set it back down. But now the bus is full, and I don't think I can lift the bus to get the blocks out anymore. Also, the bus has, I put skirting around on 3 sides of the bus to keep the wind from blowing underneath the bus. That kept the floor a lot warmer in the winter. It also gave the place for the rattlesnakes and the bunnies to sleep. So that's mixed blessings there, I guess. They appreciate it. But I created a snake nest basically right next to my house. Yeah. Oops. Anyway, so before I moved the bus, I'd have to take the skirting off, figure out how to get those blocks out from underneath. I'll probably just go to like a Harbor Freight and buy a 20-ton jack. That's enough to lift the bus a little bit to get the blocks out. And then we'll see if we can get the bus to run, put some stuff back together. The steering wheel isn't in the bus at the moment, but that's easy to put back in, that kind of thing. Get it out of where it's at. If I have access to wood, like if I can get somebody to bring me a load of wood, I could build a shed and then, one piece at a time, move everything out of the bus into the shed, then move the bus, and then look at maybe cutting it down like this. Okay. And then, if I got the bus converted to an RV, then I can legally register it as an RV. If I put insurance on it, I don't know, maybe it'll cost $100 a month, I don't know. But then I'd have it available. If I wanted to, I could drive it. It'll cost me a lot to drive it, but if I drive it once a month to the Walmart and come back with a bunch of stuff, go hit a Sam's Club and go buy a whole case of, if I bought 2 months worth of chili, it's worth doing it. That kind of thing. Chili and beans and rice and frozen burritos and, that kind of stuff. Plus, once I got the bus, I can use it to haul lumber and steel. And I talked about that already. So, I've got the bus. Even if I don't cut the bus in half right away, if I have it empty, all the seats are out of it. So I could open the rear door and I could put in 2x4s through the rear door. I don't remember if the door is, because the door is shorter than you think it is. You have to duck down quite a bit, but you would duck down and then jump to the ground if you were going out the back door. It's made for emergency exits. It's not made to be easy to get in and out of. I don't know if I could get a 4x8 sheet of OSB in through the back door or not. I don't remember. I could measure it. But I can at least get 2x4s and 2x6s that way. Okay. But yeah, if I decide to shorten up the bus, it's a relatively easy process. It'll be a fun project, right? I've got the saw to cut it in half. It's just something I happen to have. Haven't used it very often, but that would just be the funnest project ever. Okay, let's fire up the generator so I can run the saw because it pulls a lot of power. And I'll just mark a line and I'll just cut the bus in half. That'll be great. I'm going to giggle the whole time I'm doing that. That's worth it right there. Look for fun things to do, right? But yeah, if I can build a flat deck off of the back of the bus and then use that to haul wrecked cars, then I've got all of the pieces I need to build electric hot rods. Yeah. I mean, what if I took something like a Prius and give it a lift kit? So that I could run it up and down the road. I just think that would be funny because that would make everybody's head hurt. They're like, okay, so it's a Prius, but it's got Baja tires on it. If I did that, I would put skid plates underneath it. I'd put the big racing Baja lights on the front, a roof rack, I'd completely do it out just to be funny, And if it's a Prius, it's a hybrid already. So it's got its generator built into it. I've seen people do that. You take the Prius and you put, you just put a bigger battery into it so that And this is kind of the thing, is there's people doing all of this stuff, and a lot of them left notes. It's like, you don't have to go reinvent the wheel. People have done it already. They're like, here, just do this, and it works. If your Prius would get 40 or 50 miles to the gallon, and by the time you're finished, it only got 20 miles to the gallon, but it had a big enough tire to get down my road, that's actually completely practical still. And I've seen Priuses, like salvage cars that were rebuilt, $2,000, $3,000. I could build an off-road version of a Prius that could get down my road, and then if I could drive it to work or to the Walmart. I used to drive my truck at 18 miles to the gallon. If I got 20 out of a Baja Prius, I'm completely okay with that. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. If there's anything I've realized, I'm not very good at working a conventional job. And the more I think about it, if I look at my world out here, I'm close enough to retirement now. There's not really much sense in me trying too hard to get a real job now because I live so far away from most of them. TxDOT would be a really good exception to that. I could end up getting to drive a backhoe or something, which was, as a kid, I had a Tonka backhoe. That was my dream, was to grow up and drive a backhoe. That was, I had like 3 or 4 things that I always enjoyed. If the neighbor came over with a backhoe to dig us a hole for some reason, I was just mesmerized. I mean, that was like a robot. That was so cool. We had a tractor with a front end loader, but we didn't have a backhoe. That backhoe was the coolest thing ever. The other cool thing that heavily warped my brain, I'm sure, was anytime I saw my dad welding something, just the idea of him taking a pile of scrap metal and building something that worked, that we needed. He was always tinkering with building something for the farm. And just growing up watching my dad building something by welding. Yeah, finally I got to a point, out here that I can do my own welding, I just never had a place that I could do it. They generally frown on welding in apartments. I don't really, get that, but, I guess they have their reasons. But it was the first time in my life that I've lived in a place that I could weld. I can make noise. I can run the generator out here. I can just, there's days I grab a sledgehammer and just beat the crap out of a piece of metal for fun. I mean, it eventually becomes something, but I just look at it and I'm like, yeah, I can make noise. This is great, It's awesome, so if I can, once I figure it out, it's like I just started piecing these things together in the last couple of weeks, honestly. I could build my version of a hot rod, only it would be an electric. I've already got the school bus. Why not put it back on the road and use it once in a while? If I needed to haul water, I could put a 1,000-gallon tank on that. I could haul water one day, and that would last me the rest of the year. So I wouldn't have to be going, at 4 miles to the gallon. That would suck. But I do it one time, and then I'm done. If I had access to this, if I saw a wrecked car, I could go buy it. And I'd have all the parts I'd need to build whatever I was going to build. That's just fun. And I just finally clicked it into my head is, when I'm out there cutting and welding and grinding, that's the best day ever. On a sunny day like today, I want to get out there and do some welding. We're gonna get this motorcycle finished, and then I'm looking for the next project. That might be it, or at least it's on the list now. Yeah. How much of this is going to happen this year? Guess we'll find out. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Oh yeah, like and subscribe. Comments. Do me the comments. They're down in the thing down there. All right. Bye.